Okay, it's time to discuss expenses and fees and how you are being charged for your mutual funds. Because most all individuals who own mutual funds understand that they're being charged. They don't really understand how and how much and how it works, but they do know they're being charged. Well, you're going to know. You might not like it, but it's important to understand, especially because now you're the expert for your family and friends, right? And you can't let them down. Plus, there are going to be times when it could come in very handy and you're going to look like a genius. I'll explain that as we go along. Starting on slide number 7. Every mutual fund has what is called annual operating expenses. Every mutual fund has annual operating expenses. There are 3 major annual operating expenses. And then there's a 4th one that we'll take a look at, which is really separate from the first 3. So let's take a look at the first 3. Management fees, 12B1 fees, what a stupid name, and then accounting and other expenses. The management fees are the fees that are paid to the portfolio managers, the research analysts, who make the investment decisions. Remember the people in the top hats? That's right. Those individuals are very well paid. Plus, it's not an inexpensive endeavor. If you do it right, if your mutual fund company is doing the research correctly, it's a very expensive thing to do. It's the most expensive part of the mutual fund. And so what's going to happen is every year they're going to charge anywhere from 0.2% to 2% or more based on how much is in your mutual fund. So what does that mean? If you have $100 and they charge 1%, that means every year they're going to take out $1. That's how it works. Is 2% $2? 0.2% 20 cents for every $100. And we'll discuss that in detail as we go along. Now, what are the 12B1 fees? I mean, what is this name? I mean, where did it come from? Well, it comes from a regulation, a section of the Investment Company Act, where mutual funds are required to show you what they are paying for advertising, servicing, and distribution. Do cola companies, soda companies have to tell you how much they're paying for advertising, servicing, and distributing their soft drinks? Do shoe companies, car companies? No. And if you ask them, they'll go, huh? We don't know. And they probably won't. You have to talk to the folks at the headquarters to find out actually how much they are. How much of that can of Coca-Cola is for the advertising to make people fatter. But anyway, mutual funds have to show you that. It's part of the rules. The last annual operating expense is accounting and other expenses, meaning everything else. Doing the bean counting of the finances, the website, the rent, the janitors, everything else that takes to run a business. The mutual fund in this case is thrown into that category. Now, what's this last one? Notice there's a line between the first 3 and the last one. Well, the last one is a trustee fee, and that is only for what the IRS calls tax qualified accounts. And why is that? Because when you have a Roth IRA or 401k or 403b or educational savings accounts or medical savings accounts, the IRS requires a trustee to actually hold on to the money. So don't worry, folks, they're not going to run away with it. But their job is to make sure that everything is done correctly according to IRS specifications. And for that, you get charged $10. I've seen as high as $30. Now, I was just talking with another person who said, "Oh no, mine are more." And I said, "Are you sure?" I find that hard to believe. And sure enough, I was really surprised. I thought it was a one-time fee of about $27. Well, they charge him this like 2 or 3 times, or every 2 or 3 months, every once a quarter or something like that. So that's over $100 and some dollars. So I was pretty amazed. So be careful. Sometimes the trustee fee is very expensive, but normally it's about $10 a year. Okay, now slide number 8. The annual operating expenses are always there, no matter which mutual fund you choose. But on slide number 8, we see the difference between load and no-load funds. And load is a kind of a dumb name. It's a sales commission. It's a sales charge. So they call it a sales load. And traditionally, mutual funds all had loads, all had sales charges. But starting in the 50s, 1960s, and especially into the 1970s, more and more no-load funds became popular. And so you'd say, well, why would you ever want to buy a load fund? Well, typically, the load fund is sold by a broker, and that's how the broker gets paid. So if you need the assistance of a broker, then the typical type of fund they would sell you in the past was the sales load, a load fund. It's gotten trickier because people say, well, I don't want to buy that, pay that upfront fee. No problem. So they've hidden the sales load, as we'll see. But if you believe that you need the advice of an advisor, the sales load is often the cheapest way over the long term to buy your funds. If you do not believe you need the help of a salesperson, a financial advisor, then you could choose a no-load fund. Or you may find an advisor who says, oh no, we only do no-load funds and we'll charge you for our services in some other way. And some of them are fee only. Others get a commission, but it's not an upfront commission. It gets very complicated. But what I want to tell you, and what we'll see, is that sometimes load funds wind up being cheaper over the long term than the no-load funds, and that's because of the annual operating expenses. Let's continue. Slide number 9. The load funds traditionally were all front-end load, Class A. Some mutual fund companies call them Class 1, but normally you're going to see Class A. They charge an upfront fee, and then they have lower annual operating expenses in perpetuity. Perpetuity. That's a great. It means forever, right? But it's a great way to spit on your friends. My mutual fund has lower annual operating expenses in perpetuity. But there's that upfront fee. And so when brokers had a hard time all of a sudden in the 1980s and 1990s selling upfront fees, they said, we got to do something about this. So they created the Class B shares, which turned out not to be the best deal. And they seem to be disappearing now. Many companies are just saying we're not going to have Class B anymore. Some of them still have it. They have a back-end fee. They don't charge you up front. They charge you in the back end. You go, wait a minute, that doesn't make any... Well, it does, actually, because the back-end charge is a contingent deferred sales charge. What a great name, right? Contingent deferred. It goes down over time. The brokers had to deal with people who didn't want upfront fees, and they had to deal with people who didn't want back-end fees, so they said, we got to come up with one that doesn't have upfront or back-end fees. And they came up with what were used to be called broker no-load or just no-load funds, Class C shares, sometimes Class 3. They had no upfront fee, no back-end fee, but they had higher annual expenses in perpetuity or for a long time. So you see what they're doing? They're just amortizing the load over time. Well, the Securities and Exchange Commission got hip to that and said, no more, no more. You got to call it a load fund. All you're doing is stretching out. You're amortizing. That's the fancy financial term that we use. We're stretching out the fee, the upfront fee, the back end fee over time. So now Class C shares must be called load funds, even though some people in the industry still refer to them as broker no-load funds. Okay, so now let's take a look at the no-load funds. Well, after the gig was up, actually before the gig was up, investment advisors, financial representatives, sales people, brokers, whatever you want to call us, decided that they wanted to charge people not as an upfront fee or a back-end fee, but they're going to charge them a wealth management fee. We're not your brokers. No, no, no. We're not salespeople. What a terrible thing to call us. We are your wealth managers. And for that, we'll charge you on top of the mutual fund fee. We'll charge you 1 or maybe even 2% to manage your account. Well, a little bit of arithmetic shows you that if you go with a financial advisor who does this, over the long term, you're going to spend a whole lot more in terms of fees. But I'll never forget this one guy talking about these accounts and how he sold them. He said, oh, yeah, I know, but you send them a bottle of wine on their birthday, send them a card for Christmas, a bottle of scotch for Christmas, take them out golfing. They're happy. I just thought, how cynical. You're doing something that's not in their best interest. But it's okay as long as you send them a bottle of wine on their birthday. Okay, now, the last category are the true no-load funds. Now, notice we put them in quotes because the IRS or the Securities and Exchange Commission, they don't call them true. They don't put true is not a legal term. It's just what the financial media calls them. They are mutual funds that have no upfront fee, no back-end fee, no 12B1 fee that's greater than 0.25%. See, that's how the IRS got around calling the C shares load funds. They said if the 12B1 fee is greater than 0.25%, then it's a load fund. Hang on a minute. It'll make more sense later on. But even if it's a true no-load fund, if the annual operating expenses are high, it could wind up costing you more over the long term than the upfront fee that you pay with the Class A shares. Yeah, this is what you're up against, folks. This is why many people don't really understand what the hell's going on with their mutual funds. Slide number 10. So let's take a look at a real mutual fund. This is a mutual fund that has been around in one shape or another since 1926, I think. And it was started by one of the gentlemen who went on to found Merrill Lynch. And remember, I don't know if you remember, but the first name was Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith, I think. And one of those guys, not Merrill or Lynch, but one of the other three guys, was the guy who started Fundamental Investors. And it's changed hands since then, but what a great name. Do you remember Fundamental Analysis from Chapter 12 when we discussed stocks? What would you think these people do, the people with the top hats? Indeed. They look at the companies before they invest in them and look at their fundamentals, their position in the industry, how much their earnings per share, their price to earnings ratio, the dividends that they're paying, and a lot of other things, folks. But they don't put any credence, or maybe they put a very tiny little credence, in the technical analysis where they look at the little squiggles on the screen and say, okay, well, it's going to do this next. No. They believe in fundamental analysis. And they have the A, B, C, and F shares. And we're going to discuss each one. They actually have more, but we're not going to go into more detail about these. If you understand these four, you understand pretty much how the whole thing works. Class A shares are the upfront fee shares. And this company charges 5.75%, which in the past was low, but now it's on the high side. What does that mean? That means for every $100 you put in, they're going to charge you $5.75. If you put in $50, that's $2.87.5, so $2.88. If you put in $1,000, that's $57.50. If you put in $10,000, that's $575. If you put in $100,000, that's no, it's not actually. What? No. Once you get above $25,000, and then $50,000, and $100,000, and $250,000, you receive what are called sales charge breakpoints. And that's why over here it says maximum sales charge. That's the maximum they will charge. They may charge you less depending on how much you either invest or your account value goes up. So if you're going to invest over $1 million, you don't pay any sales charge. Let's say that again, folks. If you're in the 1% and you have over $1 million to invest, you don't get charged any sales charge. So in other words, what's the industry saying? Yeah, rich people, come to us. We love you. And we'll treat the working grunts more unfairly. And people say, well, that's not fair. And you turn around and say, well, life's not fair. And because the more money they have, the more money they're going to charge in the future. So they want to attract a lot of money. So they make it great for people. Plus, also, if you do start with them, even at the 5.75% level, if you stick with it over time, you're going to be up there in the $1 million level, and they're going to say, see, we're rewarding you for having that stick-to-itness. Huh? How's that? Did I dance around that well enough? Yeah, well, okay. Let's keep going. So you paid that 5.75% or 4.5% or 4 or 3 or 2, 1 or 0% on the initial investment. How much are you going to pay over time? See, annual operating expenses. Right. For the Class A shares, you're paying 0.25% for management fees. What does that mean? That means for every $100 you have in the account, 25 cents every year will go to the people in the top hats who are doing the research, knocking on the doors of the companies that they want to invest in perpetuity. Forever, that money is going to be taken out of your account. The distribution and or service fees for the actual selling and servicing of the mutual fund, 24 cents, 0.24%. And all the other expenses, the website, the accounting, the transactions, and the janitor and the rent and all the other stuff, 12 cents, 0.12%. So, for every $100 you have in the account, you're going to be charged 61 cents every year for every $100 you have in the accounts. I said that already. Yeah, right. Does that sound high? Does that sound low? Well, in actuality, it's on the low side for most mutual funds. It's on the lower side. It's a lot less than what banks or life insurance companies charge you. If you went to your bank and said, how much are you charging me for every $100 I have in there? They'll go, huh? We don't know. And they won't. You have to find somebody at the headquarters. If you go to a life insurance company, they'll go, oh, our services are free. Yeah, right, buddy. They charge far more, but they are not required by law to tell you how much. Right, indeed. So you go to your broker or your, whatever you want to call them, and say, I don't really want to pay this upfront fee, And what do they say? No problem. There's always no problems. Just get used to it. No problem. Sit down. For you, we have the Class B shares. Look. No upfront fee. But what's this maximum deferred sales charge? 5%. What difference does that make? Relax, boopy. That 5% is just the first year. The second year it's 4, and then 3, and then 2, and then 1, and then 0. So after 6 years, you don't pay any sales charge. You see? It's called a contingent deferred sales charge. So you go, okay, all right, that sounds good. I'm in it for the long term. But then you look at the annual operating expenses, and you find that they're going to charge you 25 cents for every $100. Well, that's the same as the Class A shares for the management fees. That's the same. But then, what happened to the 12B1 fees? They went from 24 cents to $1. And they will charge you that extra amount on your 12B1 fees for 8 years. After the 8th year, it will then go down to what the Class A share charges, 24 cents. So that's why it's called a contingent deferred sales charge. Sure, we're not going to charge you, as long as you keep the money in the account, through your sales charge. That's going to go down to 0. But we're going to charge you via the 12B1 fees. The other expenses are the same, 12 cents. So you wind up with $1.37. More than twice what the A shares are going to charge you. But only for the first 8 years. So you see what's happening here? Do you want to pay me now? Or do you want to pay me later? So you go to your broker and you say, well, Ms. Broker, I don't want to pay an upfront fee. I don't want to pay a back-end fee. And your broker says, relax, no problem. For you, we have the Class C shares. You know, we used to be able to call them broker NoLoad funds, but the SEC, they won't let us do that anymore. But anyway, there's no upfront fee. There's a 1% fee if you take the money out in the first year, which is actually makes sense because this is a mutual fund. You want to leave it in for the long term. So, okay, you're not going to do that. No, we're in it for the long term, Ms. Broker. There's the 25-cent management fee. That hasn't changed. There's the $1 service charge, the distribution and or service and or servicing or marketing fees, and then 16 cents for other expenses. So it's $1.41 for 10 years. Yeah. So you go to your broker and you say, well, I don't want the upfront fee. I don't want the back end fee. And I don't want to have high annual operating expenses. And what do you think you know what your broker's going to say? No problem. Sit down, puppy. For you, we have the financial investment advisor shares. We're not your broker. Oh, no. We're your wealth manager. And for you, we have the F shares, sometimes called I shares. F for financial advisor, investment. I for financial investment advisor. I've seen them FI. In fact, we're going to see one. FI, financial investment advisor. No upfront fee, no back-end fee. Look, low annual operating expenses. What could you not like about the financial advisor shares? They charge you an extra 1 or 2% every... What was that? We're going to charge you an extra 1 or 2% every... The mumbles something about annual operating expenses on top of what the mutual funds charge. So the reality is, if you choose these things, your broker is going to make far more money off of you over the long term than if you just paid the upfront fee. But again, do you think most people understand this? And the truth is they don't. And I've discussed this with some who are clients, some who weren't clients. I'll never forget I have some great war stories. But one poor gentleman, well, he wasn't poor, he was actually very wealthy. He was a member of a very wealthy family who showed me the brokerage firm agreement and statement, and I explained to him, I said, do you understand that they're charging you 1% a year to manage this account on top of whatever fees you generate for the mutual funds? And he's going, I don't understand. Well, this is a very substantial account. And I showed him the fee at the end, and he goes, I said, you understand this is the 1% fee? This was on a very substantial amount. And he said, no, that's a lot of money. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. But if you send them a bottle of wine on their birthday, take them out, golfing, steakhouse, You see, I told you I was going to insult everybody. We've insulted real estate agents. We insulted life insurance agents. We're going to insult brokers, too. I mean, remember, I is one. Slide number 11. Now, here's another very good mutual fund. Been around for a good long time. Well run. Alliance Bernstein. Bernstein. Now they just call them AB. They call them AB. I still refer to as Alliance, and they're a good company. They have some great mutual funds, and they got some not so great mutual funds. But this one's one of their better ones. It's called the Alliance Large Cap Growth Fund, and it's similar to the one we just looked at, in that what it invests in, the type of companies, large companies. They're more growth oriented, where the fundamental investors were growth and income, but the same idea. And they have the A, B, C, and the F shares. Now, the A shares have that 4.25%. So wait a minute, there's a cool thing right there, right? Remember, the other one was 5.75%. Not so bad. But look at the management fee, 75 cents. The other one was 25 cents. 25 cents for the distribution and or service fee, the 12B1 fees. 24 cents for other expenses, $1.24. So they're charging you $1.24 every year in perpetuity. Right. The Class B shares have no upfront fee, but they only have a 4% charge. And it goes 4, 3, 2, 1. So they go down to zero faster than the first fund. But notice 75 cents for the management fees, $1 for the 12B1 fees, 28 cents for the other expenses. And so now we're up to $2.03. Now, I forget if they go to the A shares after 4 or 6 years. I forget. I got to go back and look. I need to go back and look. But 2%, $2. Now we're getting close to what the banks and we're not anywhere near where the banks and life insurance companies charge, but we're pretty darn close. We're getting close. 3-4% is what they charge. So the Class C shares work the same way. No upfront fee, a 1% fee if you take it out within the first year, which you're not going to do. It's not a smart thing. It's a mutual fund. It's a long-term investment. But here we have 75 cents for the management fee, $1 for the distribution and or service fees, and 25 cents or 2%, $2 for every $100. And I forget how long the Class C shares last for Alliance. It might only be 8 years. I forget. I got to go back and look. I should know these things, right? You can't know everything. And then they have the Class F shares, which have no upfront fee, no back-end fee, 75 cents, no distribution and or service fees, 24 cents for the other expenses, so 99 cents for every $100, but add another 1 or 2%, another $1 or $2 for every $100 you have in the account for the financial investment advisor wealth management fee. Oh boy. Slide number 12. Legg Mason Value Trust. Well, actually, it's now called the ClearBridge Value Trust. And why do I include this one? Well, there's a method to my madness. This mutual fund was very famous. Now it's become infamous. The Class C shares were and still are the most popular. In fact, they weren't called the Class C shares. They were called the primary shares? Yeah, right, primary shares. But a few years ago, they added the Class A shares and changed the name of the primary to this Class C shares. They don't have the Class B. So the A shares have a 5.75% upfront fee, like the very first mutual fund we saw. 68 cents for the management fee, 25 cents for the distribution and or service fees, the 12B1 fees, and 9 cents for other expenses, or $1.02. But those are relatively new. And most people who have invested in the Legg Mason Value Trust, now called the ClearBridge Value Trust, still have the Class C shares. No upfront fee, almost 1%, 0.95%, almost 1%. If you take the money out within 1 year, which you're not going to do because it's a long-term investment. 68 cents for the management fees, 95 cents for the 12B1 fees, and 14 cents for other expenses. So $1.77 for the primary shares. And my understanding is they do not revert. I got to go back and look. My understanding is they stay Class C shares. Now, here's the deal. Why did Why did they do this? Well, because for many years this was called a no-load fund. The brokers said this is a broker no-load fund. The SEC came along and said, look, all you're doing is hiding the sales charge here in the 12B1 fee. And they made the rule such that if this number is greater than 2.25%, 25 cents, then you have to call it a load fund. Now, I'm cynical enough to just say, well, look, buddy, all I got to do is move that amount up into the management fee, and no problem, I now have a no-load fund. I'm sure that the SEC already thought of that and said, no, Payano, you can't get away with that. That's not how we do things here. But who knows? I don't know. I don't know what other restrictions they placed. I do my best. I do what I'm told to do, folks. As a broker, you have to follow certain regulations. You don't have free speech, believe it or not. You have a certain amount of restricted speech that you cannot say. So I don't know how they pulled it off, but anyway, now these are no-load funds. They have the financial investment advisor shares, 68 cents, 25 cents, 16 cents, $1.09. But again, add another buck or two on top of that. And what about these institutional shares? What's going on with these? Do you have to be institutionalized to get them? Because they look like the best deal, 82 cents total. We'll come back to those later. And we'll come back to the Legg Mason Value Trust later because do you remember Bill Miller in Chapter 12? Do you? Mr. Bill Miller beat the S&P 500 15 years in a row. Well, this is his fund. This is the fund that he did the tremendous run-up. And it's also the fund where he just fell apart in. So we're going to see that the result of that at the end of our presentation today. So let's continue. I'm a big Monty Python fan from many years back. And now for something completely different. Yes. The Vanguard 500 Index Fund on slide 13. This fund is not like any of the three funds that came before. Remember, one of these things is not like the others. This is it. This fund is very different. Remember all the people in the top hats who were paid very well and who we had to pay for through the management fee? They don't exist for this fund. This fund could be run by you or me. Did I say that right? This could fund. Yeah, right. We're the objects. We could run this fund. And why? Because all we would have to do is go look at the list of the 500 stocks on the Standard & Poor's 500 index. Do you remember that from Chapter 12? You can't help but hear about the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the NASDAQ Composite. This fund goes out there and buys the companies that are on the list. And if they're not on the list, they don't buy them. The term for this is passive management. And we'll discuss this later on when we get to the different types of mutual funds. But remember that these people are not doing any research. Hence, they should, and I use the word should because some of them don't, they usually have and they should have low annual operating expenses. You're anticipating what I'm going to say, and I'll wait until the next presentation. Because what's going to happen is there are going to be brokers, remember those wonderful people with the three-piece suits, and who I happen to be one of, who are going to try to sneak in index funds with high annual operating expenses. They're going to try to sneak these things into your 401k and your 403b. But not Vanguard. Vanguard is publicly out there saying, we're on your side and we're going to create the lowest fees possible. So their management fees are 15 cents. No upfront fee, no back-end fee, okay? 15 cents. That's lower than any of the mutual funds we've seen, right? And their 12B1 fee is $20. And that's only if you have less than $10,000 in your account Or if you do have less than $10,000, if you sign up for electronic delivery, they'll waive the $20 fee. Pretty cool. And then the other expenses are 2 cents. So now, from $1.50, from $2, we've gone down to 17 cents. Pretty cool, huh? Uh-huh. Well, they better not charge you. Why? Because they're not doing anything. All they're doing is looking at the list of 500 stocks and buying it. And if it's not on the list, they don't buy it. If it's on the list, they buy it. And what that did for them is make them incredibly wealthy and powerful. And Vanguard is now the largest mutual fund company out there. And because of that, the company that was the number one company decided if you can't beat them, join them. So on slide 14, we see the Fidelity Spartan. You see Spartans were sparse. They were abstemious. That's a fancy way of saying they were cheap. The Spartan 500 Index Fund. Vanguard pioneered low-fee mutual funds and was able to overtake Fidelity as the number one mutual fund company by size. So what did Fidelity do? All right, they eliminated all sales loads and created their own index funds and lowered their fees below Vanguard. Okay, Vanguard, take this. No upfront fee, no back-end fee, 2.5 cents for the management fee. The 12B1 fee is a $12 fee if your account is below $2,000. Again, if you sign up for automatic investments, then no problem. 7 cents for other expenses, so 9.5 cents. It reminds me of Limbo. Hello, can you go? So now we're down to 9.5 cents for every $100. But again, the reason they can charge so little is because they're not doing any research. They're allowing Standard & Poor's, the company that made your textbook, by the way, McGraw-Hill, and they own television stations and magazines and radio stations. They're allowing them to keep a list of 500 companies, and they're buying the companies that are on that list. Yeah. Slide number 15. So every mutual fund is required by the Investment Company Act of 1940 to show you what are examples of the costs over time. And they're buried deep inside the prospectus, so most people never know them, that they're there. But if we go back to the fundamental investors, the first fund we look at, we see over time that, forgetting the F shares for now, the A shares wind up being the cheapest over time. At first, they wind up being the most expensive because the SEC requires the mutual funds to use $10,000. As if everybody's got $10,000 to plop down, right? I'd rather them use $50 a month, $100 a month, but they don't ask me. So those A shares wind up costing us a lot in the first year because of that 5.75%. And the B and the C shares, well, we didn't redeem them, so we don't get hit with a back-end charge. And we keep going, and after 3 years, the A shares are still more expensive. After 5 years, well, the A shares are now looking, they're still more expensive than the B and C, but their B and C are catching up, aren't they? And after 10 years, right, the A shares wind up being the cheapest of the A, B, and C shares. So if you believe you need the help of a financial advisor, or if the funds that you're interested, they go through an advisor, what's the best deal? A. In my humble opinion, that's what I recommend. In fact, if you're a broker and you sell B or C shares, you have to have, or F for that matter, but B or C, you have to have your client sign something that says that they have been apprised of the situation. They have been informed that over time the B and the C shares can wind up costing them more than the A shares. And if they choose the B and the C shares or the F shares, they have to initial saying, yes, that has been explained to me. Now, the F shares look like the best deal, don't they? Right. Let's read at the bottom here. Although it looks as though the F shares are the best deal, this doesn't include the advisor's annual fee. Adding the typical advisor's fee of 1% to 2% per year would easily add an additional $1,200 to $2,400 to the total cost. So over the long term, which is the best deal? The A shares. Are you confused? Yes, good. That means we've done our job. No, I apologize. I apologize on behalf of the industry. Why can't they make this more easy to understand? I don't know. I think I have my ideas. They want to give people choices, of course. No, they want people to be completely confused and just put their trust in advisors. And that drives me insane. But of course, if you talk to people in the industry, you'll probably get a very different explanation. So remember that there's two sides of every story, yours and the idiot's. Slide number 16. Okay, now let's take a look at the Legg Mason Value Trust. Now why? Well, not only does it show that the A shares wind up being cheaper than the C shares, it also shows that the financial intermediary, it shows the same thing that the other one does, it shows that the financial intermediary shares look like the best deal, but that does include the advisor's annual fee. And we also see this institutional class, which looks like the best deal overall, but how do you get the institutional class, right? You got to be, let's see. Are you a large pension fund, a university endowment, a tax-exempt charity? And oh, by the way, do you have at least $1 million to invest with us? Right, that's why it's called institutional shares. You or I do not get the institutional shares. So again, this shows that the NoLoad, which are not allowed to be called NoLoad anymore, wind up costing us more over the long term than the A shares. The financial intermediary shares will cost even more than the A or the C shares, and we can't get the institutional shares. Now, remember the index fund. And now for something completely different. Notice I have made this bold because this is the kind of thing that they're going to try to do to you. Look at the fees for the investor class. That's the one we looked at on the slide a few slides ago. The 17 cents, right? $17, 17 cents for every $100. $10,000 would be $17. And over time, that's $217. The fees for passively managed index funds will almost always be less than actively managed funds. They better be. Vanguard started another class called the Admiral class. See, Vanguard is that's the first group of ships that go out. Yeah, they're called the Vanguard. The Admiral class shares were available with a minimum of only $100,000. But now they've changed it so with as little as $10,000 you get the Admiral class. And look, $64 over 10 years. Yeah. Now, look what I say in the small print. Careful! Your 401k, your 403b may have index funds with high annual operating expenses. What? Why would your employer do that to you? What kind of employer would do that to their employees? I'll tell you what kind. Southwestern Community College. And when I explain this to the people in the Human Resources Department, they look at me and go, huh? They don't understand. Well, do you? You're probably still confused too. You have to go back over and watch this and listen to this again, don't you? And so finally, one of the people who worked there took my class and said, wow, we really are getting screwed, aren't we? I said, yes, we are. And I've brought this up with our management, and either they are too embarrassed to explain to me that they don't understand it and they don't want me to explain it to them, or they're just I don't even want to go there, folks. You've seen that Southwestern Community College has made it into the news for all kinds of hanky-panky in the administration and trucos and travesores and guilty pleas and indictments. So I'm not even going to go there. But I really angers me that now I'm smart. I mean, I'm not smart enough. This is what I do. I teach this stuff. And yo boy, over 12, 13 years ago, when about 12 years ago, when they introduced these things, I said, well, how come you're doing this to us? They didn't understand. The two of the brokers, the people in the three-piece suits, came and gave a presentation, and I'm looking at these things, and I'm saying, wait a minute, this is horrible. They didn't know they had a ringer in the audience. I said, why are you doing this to us? Why are you giving us high-fee index funds? People who buy index funds, they assume that they're going to be low-fee index funds. And he was, yeah, you're right. We're going to replace these with another index fund. We're going to take care of it. Don't worry. I mean, he's fiddling around. Yeah, they replaced it with something just as bad, their own fund, nationwide, and they threatened to sue me for complaining about this. And I said, oh, please sue me. I would love this. Boy, what kind of, you couldn't buy that kind of publicity. So be careful. And this is why I tell you this, because you're now the expert. You are now the expert. You're going to go out there, and you're going to be in that employee meeting where the broker with the three-piece suit comes and tells you about how wonderful the 401k is. And you're going to see, wait a minute, you're putting your own index fund in here that's charging 10 times more than what Vanguard or Fidelity would charge. Why are you doing that? And that person is going to go, and that's when they should just walk away. But they won't, because they know that everybody will forget about it by the time the meeting's over. And you're going to look like a genius. And your employees and your coworkers are going to say, where did you learn that? And baby, what are you going to tell them? Right? I washed your back, you washed my back. You're going to tell them BUS121, financial planning, yeah, right. And money management, Southwestern Community College. Go check out wonderprofessor. Right? Okay, good. Okay, enough. There's another type of mutual fund that we're going to discuss in the next presentation called exchange-traded funds, ETFs. They work very similar to index funds, but they often have expense ratios that are even cheaper than the index funds. How low can you go? Okay. Slide 18. A couple more slides, I promise. This is the sales breakpoint reduction schedule, the breakpoint sales reduction schedule. And it's in the prospectus, and your broker should explain it to you. If you go with the A shares, between 0 and 25% either purchased or accumulated. So if you come up with the money up front, they'll drop it. And then after your account gets up to a certain amount, new money will come in at the new sales breakpoint. It goes from 5.75 to 5%. And then to 4.5, 3.5, 2.5 to 1.5, until finally, after you've either put in $1 million or it's gone up to $1 million, you don't pay any more sales charge. You still pay the annual operating expense. So you see, as we said, they're more interested in very wealthy people. Well, sorry, what can I say? Now, read together, folks. I told you I would insult everybody, and we're going to continue to insult brokers. Class A shares typically qualify for a sales reduction if you invest a larger amount or as your investment grows. Now, in the past, it's not legal anymore. In fact, you can get kicked out of the business for it. You can get fined, and I think there might be criminal offenses. I don't know. I don't know if it's a criminal offense, but still. Some brokers in the past, no one would do it in the future, I hope, failed to inform their clients of this feature. Instead, as their client approached the break point, the broker would advise them to start another fund in a different company. Ooh, do you understand what they were doing? They want to make sure that the sales charge is the highest possible sales charge. When I first heard this, I was floored. I said, who would do that to their clients? And it turns out that there were a number of brokers who did that to their clients. It's not allowed anymore. You can get disciplined. You can get fined. You can have your license revoked. And I'm not sure if you can get a criminal offense. I'm not sure if it's a crime, but it should be. To me, it's as if you're a doctor and giving your client drugs that they don't need. I don't know if that's a perfect analogy, but that's what it seems like to me. You're not doing what's best for your client. You're doing what's best for you. Slide number 19, and you're selling the drugs. Slide number 19 is the contingent deferred sales charge schedule. And we talked about this with the Class B shares. The first year, 5%, 4, 3, 2, 1, until after 6 years. This contingent deferred sales charge is also very typical of annuities. Remember we quickly discussed annuities back in chapters 10 and 11? Except it's usually much worse. It starts off at 25% or 20% and takes 20 years to go down, 25 years. So yeah, as much as I get angry at the brokers and the mutual funds, insurance companies are far worse. So don't I told you, equal opportunity insulter. We hate everybody the same. When people say you're prejudiced, say no, I hate everybody the same. So slide number 20. Yeah, me too. I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted, and I know this stuff already. So I'm now going to ask you a quick question. I'm going to give you $10,000, folks. 10 years ago, 10,000, and you decide what to choose. Do you want the fundamental investors Class A? Remember, the Class A shares are a better deal than the Class C shares or B shares. Or the Alliance Large Cap Growth Fund, Class A. Now, the Class A shares weren't available for Legg Mason Value Trust, and besides, they don't even have that many A shares. It's mostly all C shares. They were called primary shares at the time. Or do you want to go the abstemious, cheap route, the Vanguard Index 500 Fund? Which one would you choose? It's not real money, so don't worry about it. Don't fret over it. Yeah. Okay, so now if you printed this out, you're not going to be able to see it. If you're looking at it, you're going to see when I hit this little button right here, bingo! Fees are important, but they do not tell you the whole story. When comparing mutual funds, you must look at many attributes, not the least of which are the rates of return, preferably over longer periods of time. And people say, well, come on, Payano, isn't 5 years enough? Isn't 10? Surely 10 years is enough. And I say, no. I want to look at companies that have been around for 20, 30, 50 years. And they say, well, you're out of your mind. I said, no, I'm not. There have been mutual funds, and we saw them back in Chapter 1, and we'll see them again, that have done well over decades. They're the companies that you're interested in. Notice, both the fundamental investors and the Alliance Large Cap Growth Fund over the last 10 years. Now, there's a little caveat here. The fundamental investors, the data for the end of June wasn't available. I apologize when I did this, but it's the end of May, so it's 1 month off. But both of them had mutual fund managers that were able to choose wisely. In fact, this Alliance Large Cap Growth Fund, this is on fire. These guys are great. They're a very good company. So they turned your $10,000 into $22,639 or $25,633. Now this is at the maximum sales charge. If you had gotten the funds at a lower sales break point, and your broker did not try to weasel you out of that money, you would have done even better. Look at the Legg Mason Value Trust. Oh my goodness. And this is the key. This is the important thing to take away from this. If you choose a passively managed fund, you're going to get the return, or pretty darn close, of the index. If you choose an actively managed fund, you may do better than the index. You may do worse. You may do a whole lot worse. And if you had looked at this thing 10 years ago, before Mr. Bill Miller fell down into the porcelain oasis, you would have seen a number that was very impressive. Very impressive indeed. You would have seen $37,000, because that was at the end of his long run where he beat the S&P 500 handsomely. But then in 2007 and 8 and 9, well, he actually did better in 2009, but then 10 and 11, and he just fell into the porcelain oasis. That's a fancy way of saying he fell into the toilet. I'm sorry if you didn't quite catch that joke. The organic matter hit the ventilating device for poor Mr. Bill Miller. So you see, yeah, you can do better, you can do worse, you can do a whole lot worse. The Index 500 didn't do as well as the Standard & Poor's 500 index. Well, it can't. Remember, there's that little bit of sales charge. It can't match the index, but it's very, very close. And so we see that the Standard & Poor's 500 did, over the last 10 years, 7.89%. That's through one of the worst downturns, or the worst downturn since the Great Depression, 2008 and 9. And the index 500 did, pretty darn close, 7.77%. So it turned it into about $21,000 or $10,000. Not bad, huh? Even through the worst. That's assuming you didn't run and hide in 2008 and 9. Yeah, right. So now, checking for comprehension. The last 3 slides. This is confusing. I will be the first one to admit it. It's going to take you a couple times to go through this to really understand the difference between the A, B, C, and F shares. But I want you to understand that because remember, you're the expert. Now, your family, your friends, your coworkers are depending upon you. So let's do this together. If you printed it out, you already know the answer, but this is what we do in the face-to-face class. These shares do not have an upfront sales charge. Instead, they assess a decreasing back-end load, if you withdraw your money within 6 years, or 4 years, or 8 years, depending on the company. Your annual operating expense is higher, courtesy of the 12B1 fees. Are they A, B, C, or the F or I shares? They're the B shares. Back-end B, remember that. And most companies, they revert to A shares after 4, 6, 8 years. Slide number 22. These shares do not have an upfront or back-end sales charge. The advisor called them NoLoad, which you're not supposed to do anymore, but you notice that their annual operating expense is higher than other class shares, again, courtesy of the ubiquitous, fancy way of saying everywhere, 12B1 fees. Are these A, B, C, or the F or the I? Right, they're the C shares. And they sometimes revert to A or F, meaning they'll have lower annual operating expenses after 10 years, and sometimes they don't. They're in perpetuity. And the last slide says, your advisor tells you that these shares have a very low annual operating expense. She mumbles something about wealth management. These shares are the A, B, C, F or the I. Right, they're the F, I shares, FI. She also did her best not to explain to you that her brokerage firm is going to charge you an extra 2% every year, but they'll take you out to the steakhouse and make you feel really. Oh, by the way, do you have at least $500,000 to invest with us? Oh, we don't even want to talk to you. I heard that. I heard that from a woman who the broker said, well, I don't even take a client under $500,000, and I'm thinking of moving it up to $750,000. Okay, fine. It's good for you. The people they already have that much money. They don't need your help. It's the people who are putting $50, $100 a month away. They're the ones that are going to need your help. And so we are now going to stop here. And when we come back, we're going to look at the different types of mutual funds. So, yeah, I know. If you thought this was confusing, so you're going to go back over and listen to it again, right? Yes, you are, because you're the expert now, and your friends and family are counting on you. You can't let them down, and you're going to look like a genius when you make that broker look like an idiot because he's throwing those high-fee index funds into your 401k. When we come back, we will take a look at the different types of mutual funds. So be ready for even more confusion. See ya.